I am here today representing the editorial board of Rethinking Marxism. I could also have spent my time here talking much more personally, but I was asked to represent the board who could not be here today, and so I will do so. On behalf of the board and myself, I would like to give sororal and fraternal greetings to Michael for organizing this, a wonderful event, for Jerry for emceeing the event, for the economics department for sponsoring and wanting to have this event. I want to thank all of our friends and comrades here who are from ASA, including many members, many more than I was prepared to see today, who have served on the editorial board of Rethinking Marxism from the inception. Bruce and Bill, I don't know if you're here, but you're supposed to be here. And Rick and others who came onto the board shortly after we began. McIntyre, Tom, Coop, and if I've Carol, George, Susan from the beginning, Masato, who worked on the production team from the beginning. It's actually a remarkable group. I'm sitting it right there. Harriet, who was on the board from day one. Please forgive me for that. As I say, many people. It's simply amazing. Antonio. I want to also thank, I may never get past this part of the family of Steve, who are my close friends as well, Charlotte, Karen, Peter, Lynn, and their spouses. And I did want to say a special thank you to Antonio and Johnny Millman. Johnny and I came together that first year, 1973, when the program was first started, the radical program was first started, and I'm just thrilled that he's here with me and with us today. Steve was a member of the editorial board also from the beginning of the editorial board, and actually the editorial board was created in 1985. We began our work 3 years prior to the actual publication of the first issue. He served on the board from 1985 until he stepped down in 1994. 10 glorious years. I would like to say that Steve, from the standpoint of his involvement in Rethinking Marxism, was a champion. He was a champion of causes. He was a champion of the journal. And most importantly, he was a champion of and for all of the students who served along with him. What are some of the things that I remember and I can speak about that he did in relation to the journal? First of all, he and Rick, along with several of us, from the day that we set foot on the campus here, in fact, prior to that, in our conversations back in the day when we were still at City College of New York, had always wanted to have a journal. It was just what you did if you were on the left. But there was some additional aspect to that, which was that there was some discomfort or I wouldn't say unhappiness, but some interest in producing a journal that wasn't simply radical economics, but that was specifically Marxism. A journal about Marxism. Marxist economics, but also Marxism in its broader meaning. It's not that no such journal existed in the United States, but they were very few. And as we began to talk amongst ourselves, we also recognized that we had a distinct position, a point of view, that would separate us, also bring us together, but also distinguish us from some of the other Marxist journals and organizations that existed at that time. Steve, therefore, imagined this journal, and he worked extremely hard with us to create this particular thing that we did together. My recollection of Steve is that he was willing to do anything and everything to help bring the journal about. Steve was, for example, what is called in Broadway circles an angel. We needed money for startup. Not very many people actually who even were on the board at the time knew where the money was coming from. But a few of our either employed or wealthier members were willing to front some money in order so that we could start. Otherwise, there was no hope to do that. Steve was among those people who did that, by the way, completely anonymously. It was not known at the time who was doing what in regard to providing the funds. I should also add that Steve's contributions in money, in labor, in interest, never, ever expected. It was never quid pro quo. He never expected anything. He never demanded anything. He never asked for anything. And that way he gave, and he gave freely, and he gave liberally, but he did not want to use the journal as a way to take something, put himself in front of, displace those of us who, in fact, were doing quite a lot of the work. He was willing to travel, as those of us who were on the board from the beginning had to many different places to have board meetings. He offered his home as a meeting place quite often because it was convenient. Many of us were still either here or somewhere on the East Coast. He was critical in the early stages in the meetings that we had to try to get a publisher. We had many meetings where we had set up meetings with publishers to try to convince them that this was a viable project. Most of them, of course, were unsuccessful at the time. But one thing I always remember about those meetings, and I was the editor, the first editor of the journal, and so I attended all these meetings, was the difference that it always made when Steve was in the room in how we were treated. Meetings that I would go to and with publishers without Steve, you know, it was thank you, there's the door. When Steve was in the room, it was a transformed atmosphere. And it wasn't so much because of what he said. He didn't say much. It was just simply the respect that he commanded. And his interventions were always helpful. They were timely, but they were, they demonstrated, I would say, an enormous integrity and dignity, which I think he always carried. Steve agreed not only to be on the editorial board of Rethinking Marxism, but he also agreed, along with Rick, to be on the advisory board, which was extremely important at the time, especially when we first started out. We knew that we needed to have people who were reputable and important Marxists, and not just in economics. We needed to be able to approach those people and ask them, would they be willing to serve on the advisory board? And both because we revered the work, we had so much respect for the work that Rick and Steve had already done, but also because it was an aid to us to be able to move to the next stage, bringing in other people. Steve graciously was willing to serve on the advisory board, and he was also willing to help in the writing of letters and contacting some of these more famous people. Having had the very unpleasant job myself of having to contact many of these people, I can tell you it was not delightful. To the contrary, I remember, I guess I'm not supposed to speak ill of the dead, but I do remember one board member, the famous Stephen Jay Gould, who I called on the phone after having contacted him by letter, and the conversation went like this. Who are you? What do you want? What? What? Rethinking Marxism? What? Yeah, okay, go. Goodbye. But that was his agreement to serve on the advisory board alone. So it was nice when Steve agreed to play the role rather than have the rest of us be in that position. He was always there as a consultant to the editors. Certainly, as when I was the editor, I consulted him quite often. Excuse me, David, when he was the editor, David Ruccio, who's not here today, and would have liked to have been here today, also was always in touch with Steve. Steve was one of the few people who always read the journal. That included, by the way, most of the members of the editorial board. He read the journal. Anytime you talked to him, he asked about particular articles. He had, of course, criticisms that he wanted to make. But he was, with all of the differences and criticisms, he loved the journal. He loved Rethinking Marxism, or at least that's what he told me. He was, however, most interested in that journal, being the conduit, the vehicle through which the group from the Association of Economic and Social Analysis would be able to get their work out and to have it read. He was, as I say, a great champion of graduate student work, always believed that the work that people were doing was worthy of publication, and believed that it was at least as good, if not better, than a lot of what else was out there. For me, the most important thing I want to say about Steve, and it may be something that sounds strange, is that Steve was willing to be led by his students. He led by his followership. He led by being willing to have others make decisions, take positions, do certain work. It would have been easy for the professor to step in or demand that he have privilege, and that was not his way. So he was a presence all the time in our meetings. He contributed, but most importantly, what he did was he accepted, he supported. One of the most supportive adults I think I ever met in my entire life. Because of that, he was loved. He was loved by his students. He was loved by the other editors on the editorial board. We loved him. And largely because of how he was willing to allow us to take the lead. He always believed also that those who were doing the work, he had a profound respect for labor. And he believed that those who were doing the work deserved the credit for the work that they were doing. Never, ever did he put himself in the position of taking credit for things which people often would say, you know, isn't this, this is Steve Resnick's journal. And he would say, no. Jack Amariglio is the editor. David Ruccio is the editor. Carol Beeman is, these are the people who are doing the work. They're the ones who deserve the credit. We loved him for that. I'm going to have to obviously stop because of time, I assume. I want Rick to talk, obviously, and there were many more things that I wanted to say. I was going to point out that Steve was a rabbinical scholar. He was a Talmudic scholar. He believed in close reading. He believed in question and answer. He believed in what was so important to those traditions. He believed in logic, finding the logic, seeing how arguments develop. And he contributed that to the journal, to his graduate students. In all of what he did, there was that sense that there's a way to, there are logics, and here are ways of thinking. Here's the way that an argument works. He taught us to respect thought. He taught us to respect theory and not run away from it. He didn't believe that being a radical and being a Marxist had only to do with what's called activism. He believed that he was doing activism in the realm of theory. And that was something that he taught many of us. I'm going to cut all the rest of this and just make one last, just tell you one last thing now as a personal story. I was having a difficult time writing anything. I got to a point where I was not only not writing my dissertation, I was not writing letters. I wasn't writing. It was terrible. And I had promised Rick and Steve many times that I would produce, drafts of things, and of course I kept not doing it. And I was just terrified by what I thought was the likely reaction that my two advisors and also close friends by that time felt. I was teaching at Earlham College out in Richmond, Indiana. It was 1979, 1980. And a letter came in the mail, and it was from Steve. The letter said, I'm paraphrasing now, anyway, Dear Jack, I want you to know that you may never write your dissertation. I want you to know that the block that you're facing right now may never get resolved. And I want you to know that is absolutely fine with me. I think that you are an intellectual. I think that you are a Marxist. And I think that whether or not you write a dissertation, those things are always going to be true about you. So, please understand that while, of course, I would like it if you would write your dissertation, it is fine. It's just fine. That was an act of love. It also helped me finally write my dissertation. Not immediately. It took some time. For that reason and for many, many, many others, I could tell you about. Steve Resnick was my champion. Thank you.